All right, I've got John Kurtz from here on YouTube, one of the better channels that I've started following over the last year. You do a great job, John, and I appreciate you for taking a little time and chatting today. Florida State and Clemson, not wanted by the Big Two conferences. At least that's some of the narratives, some of the phrasing, some of the media kind of talk that we've heard recently. Do you buy that at all?
Man, well, I appreciate the kind words and for having me on. It's been wild to me to watch all this unfold because, like, if you would have asked me 3 weeks ago, a month ago, is there any chance that Clemson or Florida State could wind up in the Big 12? I would have laughed at you. And I'm a Big 12 guy. I try to champion the league as much as I can, but I'm also realistic, right? I mean, I'm not going to do so to an extent where I'm going to make things up, but it's been crazy how that narrative has really taken off. I think there's a lot to consider with it, right? I mean, do I think that, again, there is a legitimate chance they do not wind up in the Big Ten or the SEC? I guess I would say now, yes, I do buy that there is a chance. Greg Sankey certainly was not in a mood to give any kind of a nod to Florida State at all at SEC Media Days and in his latest media rounds. The Big Ten, to me, is the one that always seemed to make the most sense just because it is a little bit of overkill for the SEC. Now, if they wanted to do it as a preemptive shot to prevent them from going to the Big Ten, I can understand that. But, like, look, the Big Ten being in Florida would be great for them. They're already like a coast-to-coast country. That makes all the sense in the world. I would think Fox and the Big Ten would really, really like that. I've heard from enough people now, like Ross Dellinger, Brett McMurphy, Josh Pate, who have all kind of pushed legitimacy to it may actually take going to the Big 12, even if it's a temporary stop for Florida State and Clemson, that I will acknowledge that's a possibility. But the bottom line is there's just too many variables to really say with any certainty what's actually going on here, because it does not behoove the SEC or the Big Ten at all to do any kind of like public overture toward Florida State or Clemson right now. Like, one, from a legal standpoint, that could get you tied up in a lot of things. I mean, there are, what, 4 lawsuits going on between the ACC and the two schools right now, in addition to whatever could come for you if it was found out that you were actually doing some sort of courting to those schools. And, like, look, Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti are smart enough to know that. It could be negotiation. It could be trying to get Florida State or Clemson to take a lesser cut. It could be the TV networks behind closed doors saying, hey, I know we've got a pro rata deal here, but we really don't want to offer them a full share. If you guys can try and leverage them into a corner where they're like, whoa, wait, like we don't have a spot here, we'll take whatever. Like, we'll get on our knees and beg. I mean, I think there's a million different things that could be happening as far as the actual negotiating tactics are going on there. So, I mean, I'm still in the mode that I would be surprised, I think, if they don't wind up in the Big Ten or the SEC, but not totally shocked, which is where I would have been a month ago.
When you think about the value that Florida State and Clemson bring, and that phrase keeps kind of getting thrown around, I also think, and I want to get your thoughts on this, I also think that, you want to posture your league to be really good. And just from a marketing perspective, like the Big Ten and the SEC want to be thought of as the premier conference, right? And I think most people, certainly where I live, are still going to like give that nod to the SEC. Now, if the Big Ten was to pick up, like, I don't know, Florida State, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Miami, maybe at that point you'd be like, wow, they're kind of cooking with some gas up there. But I think it's a bad look as well, just from a marketing standpoint. If you're, again, legally, they probably couldn't do it anyway. But if you're like, yeah, we are looking to add right now, like we are, and that's, I think it's a good move by your mark. I think it'd be a bad move by, Tony or Greg to be like, yeah, we need more here, because you already want to be thought of as the best. Like, we don't need anything else. And truth be told, neither one of those conferences need Florida State or Clemson. If they're both available, on the free market, I'm sure one of them takes them. But yeah, I don't think it looks good just to your current conference members to act like you're needing a Florida State or Clemson.
Well, it's such a good point because, I mean, all the buzz lately, again, has been about the Big 12. And you said it, like, for Brett Yormark, that's tremendous marketing. And that's what he is an expert in. Like, this guy has, I think, more marketing acumen than anybody that's out there in the college game right now. And he's just working with a property that's obviously below the top tier in college athletics. And it's been incredible what he did. And he just ran circles around the Pac-12 last year with that whole saga in managing the message. Not only that, the actionable steps as well, like jumping in front of them for the TV deal. But, I mean, he did a tremendous job in controlling the narrative on that. So it's not surprising to me that he's been able to do a lot of that here, because no matter what happens, the publicity that they've gotten with actually being mentioned now with Florida State and Clemson has been great for the league. It's the opposite. Yeah, if you're the SEC, man, like why? I can understand why Sankey would be looking at this like almost a little annoyed. Like, okay, like people won't stop talking about this and asking us these questions about Florida State and Clemson, which like, fine, they're good football programs, but like, have you seen our league? I mean, you see stories come out where they're like, hey, the SEC feels totally content with where they're at. And I believe that could 100% be true. And then, yeah, if Florida State and Clemson are dangling out there, they'll be like, all right, sure, fine, we'll take them. But that's the SEC attitude because they are the best conference out there. I mean, you kind of raised the question earlier: is it the SEC or the Big Ten? I mean, look, the Big Ten is so top heavy, but like the SEC has so much more depth and they're top heavy. Like I would take the SEC all day, every day in that conversation. So yeah, I just don't think that there's much of an advantage in any way, shape, or form to acknowledge it or even try to just deflect at this point if you are the SEC or the Big Ten. It probably if you were a PR expert, somebody that's advising them from a conference level, that's to me the way that you would have them play it. Like flippant, we don't need this, we're good, look at our league. That's the kind of tone that I would be projecting.
I'm probably biased, and so I'd like for you to counter me, or I mean, if you want to agree, then great. I'll maybe feel better about it. But when this word value continues to be tossed around, and discussions around Florida State are not the same as eyeballs on TV. But when you think about it, Florida State and Clemson maybe to a slightly lesser degree. I don't want to say they sat there and dominated the questions at four different, conference kickoffs or media days, but they certainly were a theme or a topic at all four Power Four conferences media days. I know that doesn't translate exactly to value, but it is hard for me to think that they could be this big of a topic and not be interesting from a value proposition. Am I connecting two dots that don't need to be connected there, or what are your thoughts around that?
I think it's nuanced. Like I think there's definite value. I mean, there's obvious great value in Florida State and Clemson. The question comes down to the TV networks. If you're talking about adding them to the Big Ten or the SEC, is there enough value to kick in? Like for instance, with the SEC's pro rata, like is it enough value that the TV network feels like it's worth paying a full share to bring in Florida State or Clemson here, which is just hard. That is nothing against FSU and Clemson at all. It's just we talked about it. The SEC already has so many great brands condensed already that's a tough bar to clear because you're talking about competing with the absolute best of the best. And even as we'll really rip on the mid to bottom tier of the Big Ten. I mean, up at the top, Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, like they have some USC. I mean, they have some tremendous brands up at the top of the sport. Like you are having to jump over a really, really clear bar. So I think take that, set it aside. As far as the media day conversation goes, it definitely does speak to Florida State and Clemson being really good, prominent programs. I mean, Clemson, what they've done in the last, I know Dabo has fallen off a little bit here the last 5 years, but what they did the decade before that, I mean, it's unbelievable. A couple of national championships, beating Alabama, going toe-to-toe with Nick Saban when basically nobody has been able to. There's a reason that they command the attention that they do. Florida State, the history, and then fairly recently, obviously, winning a national championship, and then even last year, probably wrongfully being denied the opportunity to go win another national championship. So I think they have a lot of value. I would also just throw in the caveat. My pushback on it would be, like, people are fascinated by realignment. And so when you have any kind of realignment news going on, people are really fascinated by it. But especially then you're going to say, hey, we've got a maybe like tier 2, borderline tier 1 kind of program or two here in Florida State and Clemson, and it's realignment related. It really does amplify things a lot. And you have people working in their own self-interest, like your mark in the Big 12. They're going to want to push that because, hey, we'll take that publicity, man. That is great for us if we're going to be even mentioned with those sorts of schools. And then the media is going to run with it. Everybody is looking at what happened at Big 12 Media Day. Well, now we need it. There's a chain reaction, right? Now we need to go get Jim Phillips' reaction and the ACC's reaction. And now we need to know what the SEC thinks about this and this Brett McMurphy story and the Big Ten. So it just has this kind of cascading effect. And I think it's the same reason that, like, when guys like you or I are doing our content, it's like there are some days I go on and I'm like, I would rather just do straight up football talk, right? Like we got into this because we love college football. But as fascinating as realignment can be to me, there are days when I get a little tired of it, but we know what drives the views and the numbers. I mean, people really, really love it and get into it. So I think it is elevated a little bit too, just by how much of a fascination the entire college football world has with it.
Yeah, changing the entire landscape. I get comments all the time like, I'm so over this realignment stuff. Can you just talk about football? And I mean, yeah, I'm kind of with you. Like, I'd love to. Like, I love doing schedule breakdowns and power ranking conferences and teams and programs. But I mean, the truth of the matter is, it's not just all about, oh, well, let me do what's going to get the most clicks or most views. But when people start watching it like 10-1 to the other videos, then I'll probably slow down on it. But as many comments as it's like the bad Yelp reviews. Like, nobody goes and reviews like anything when it's good. Yeah. People just show me with their views that they are still very, very interested. So, all right, last one, and then we'll maybe move on from this a little bit. But Florida State was called a disruptor, and then Jim Phillips echoed that from the platform at ACC kickoff. He said it twice, and then he was asked about it once by Andrea Adelson of ESPN, and so he ended up mentioning that 3 times. Thoughts on? I just want to get your thoughts on that in general. I mean, with an entire landscape that again, maybe being a homer here, but would love to hear kind of an outsider's opinion. An entire landscape that's been pretty disrupted from Texas and Oklahoma maybe doing that originally, and then the Big Ten disrupting things by taking USC and UCLA. Just thoughts on the disruptor comment, and I certainly wouldn't even argue that Florida State has been a disruptor, but just kind of want to hear your opinion on it.
Well, the first thing I would say is, I don't think you have to view it as like a bad thing. I mean, it's a bad thing to Jim Phillips because he doesn't want his conference being disrupted the way that it is right now. But I will point out again, and I swear this isn't some subliminal message to connect FSU to the Big 12, but Brett Yormark has used that term a lot for what he wants to be. And at Big 12 Media Days, I did an interview with the Big 12's CMO, their chief marketing officer, Tyrell Kirkham, which you can see on my channel. It was a great interview, and he used that term multiple times. Like, that's the Big 12 marketing arm is saying we want to be a disruptor in the college athletic sphere. So that's kind of the name of the game right now. Like you said it, if you want to get what you want, you have to be a disruptor. And I would just say for Florida State, like, yes, with the lawsuits going on and Clemson, everything that is tied up in the ACC right now, it has been a lot of disruption. I would certainly echo that I think it's probably fair to say, but that doesn't really matter because a lot of people have been disruptors in a lot of different ways, not just Brett Yormark. I mean, it started with Texas and Oklahoma and the SEC. And if you want to point the finger at the disruptor that kicked us into this whole wave of everything, like why we're here, it's because in July 2021, we got the news that Texas and Oklahoma were going to the SEC. And even before that, I mean, the only reason we found out when we did was because Texas A&M decided to be a disruptor, because the story leaked through the Houston Chronicle's Texas A&M beat writer, because A&M was upset that Texas was coming back into their conference. So they leaked the story. So, like, this whole saga has been filled with disruptors and disruption all the way on down. USC's been a disruptor in the Pac-12 for years. Not being happy, holding progress back, and just ultimately wanting out. And then they were the ones that left and started the mass exodus from the Pac-12 as they jumped to the Big Ten. So if I'm looking at it, I would say yes, Florida State has been a disruptor, but they are just another cog in a long line of disruptors that have been involved in this whole realignment timeline that we've been living on. And look, I'm a Big 12 guy. If you want to even go back to 2010 and 2011, like everything that happened then, if you want to talk about Missouri and Nebraska, there was a lot of blame going around at the time to like Missouri for really starting to get a wandering eye in the Big 12 when all that first started to happen. I mean, Missouri, Nebraska, Texas A&M, oh, by the way, back to Colorado, all disruptors back in that realignment cycle. So Florida State is not the first. They won't be the last. And frankly, if you want to get what you want right now in this realignment age, I think you most of the time have to be kind of a disruptor.
Yeah, very rarely do you accomplish anything without maybe disrupting things, and maybe that's bigger than just college football even. But Florida State's got a choice right now between, and people may disagree with this, but they feel like they're going to die if they don't disrupt, and so take your pick, I guess. John, where can people follow you? Where can they find more of your work?
Yeah, appreciate that. On my YouTube channel is just my name, John Kurtz, JOHNKURTZ. If you're a Big 12 fan, I've got a Big 12 newsletter called Open for Business. You can sign up at ofbnews.com and get Big 12 news straight to your inbox twice a week. And you can follow me on Twitter, just JLKURTZ, JL Kurtz on Twitter.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, anytime.